Nevertheless, if we use suffering and abuse as criteria for deciding who are the true Hebrew Israelites, then by the same token, the first people who naturally fit that bill would be the Jews of Israel. No race in the entire world that has been hated, abused, tortured, and killed to the same degree as the Jews. The German Nazi Holocaust was just a small drop in an ocean of 2,000-year-long suffering. As we speak, the Jews are surrounded by 200 million Arab haters who want them completely annihilated. In addition to this inner circle of haters, there is an outer circle of over 1 billion haters, the Muslims. Iranian scientists are working day and night to produce a nuclear bomb in order to wipe Israel from the map of the world. 1.2 billion Muslims hate the Jews and wish to see all of them exterminated. Each and every Muslim prays 5 times a day and calls in prayers the Jews, the accursed people on whom the wrath of God abides forever. Quran, Surah 1, 7. The so-called black Hebrew Israelites and those who support their conspiracy theory call the Jews, the serpent people and Satan worshippers. They count them as fake and impostors who have nothing to do with the children of Israel of the Bible. In order to examine this claim, let us state briefly the history of the Jews and what has happened to them after the destruction of their temple in 70 AD. Under the Roman military commander, Titus Vespasian, the Roman army attacked Jerusalem in 70 AD. They destroyed the temple, massacred the entire population, ransacked the city, and made it desolate. The historian Flavius Josephus reported that after the destruction of the Jewish temple, the Romans under Titus Vespasian killed 1,300,000 Jews. They destroyed 128 Jewish synagogues in Jerusalem and 180 synagogues in Judea and Samaria. Rome took 97,000 Jews as prisoners, of whom many ended up in the slave markets in Europe. Johannes ben Zakkai fled with many Jews towards the Mediterranean Sea and settled not far from Jerusalem, where he created a new form of Judaism in which he abolished the animal sacrifices and dedicated their time to the study of the Torah. The menorah became in the place of the temple. In Gamla at the Golan Heights, today the border between Israel and Syria, some Jews settled there and established the first Jewish synagogue. Many other survivors fled to the vicinity of the Dead Sea and hid themselves in the well-known fortress of Masada created by Herod. The Romans sent an army which laid siege to the fortress for 3 whole years. Then the Romans used the Jewish prisoners to build a ram. According to the historian Flavius Josephus, over 1,000 Jews preferred to kill themselves rather than to surrender and become slaves to the Romans. First, every man killed his wife, sons, daughters, and other relatives. Then, every man killed another man until the last man took his life. Masada became the symbol of the Jewish perseverance. Today, the Israeli soldiers swear allegiance that Masada must never be allowed to fall again. In 132 AD, a Jew by the name of Simeon bar Kokhba, the son of Star, led a 3-year revolt against the Roman Empire. 500,000 Jews were killed by the Romans, thousands were sold into slavery and many went into captivity. Judaism was no longer recognized as a legal religion in the Roman Empire. In 135 AD, the Roman Emperor, Aelia Hadrian, put down the last resistance of the Jews to the Roman Empire. He destroyed the entire city of Jerusalem and rebuilt a new city which he renamed after himself, Aelia Capitolina. A pagan temple for the Roman god Jupiter was erected on the Temple Mountain. Another temple for Venus was built on Golgotha, just outside the city. The Emperor Hadrian knew that the bitter enemies of the Jews were the Philistines, the former inhabitants of the southern region of the Kingdom of Judah. Therefore he changed the name of the entire country to Syria Palestina, which retains its name until the present time. Many people think that Palestine was the original name of the country which was given to it by the so-called Arab Palestinians. Those Arabs did not become inhabitants of that country until the 7th century, when the Muslims invaded it in 636 AD. The Patriarch of Jerusalem, a Palestinian Christian, handed the keys of the city to the second Caliph, Umar ibn al-Khattab. The Muslims occupied Palestine until the European Crusaders kicked them out in 1099 AD. After he put an end to the Jewish revolt, the Emperor Hadrian forbade their presence in that region. He issued a decree that any Jew to be found in Aelia Capitolina or in any place in the entire region of Syria Palestina should be put to death. After that, began the mass migrations of the Jews out of their homeland, and as the Bible prophesied, scattering them all over the world. They went everywhere in the known world where there were communities of people. The Roman historian Ustebra said, "There is no city on earth that these people are not found." Some of them stayed in northern Palestine, Galilee, closer to their homeland. By the 2nd century 2 million Jews became refugees in Babylonia, Iraq today. The rest of the Jews were scattered throughout the Roman Empire. In 200 AD, the Roman Emperor Severus forbade religious conversions to Judaism. In the 3rd century, the Roman Emperor, Constantine, who converted to Christianity in 312 AD and made it the state religion, had outlawed Judaism and cut the ears of the Jews and dispersed them as vagabonds. During the 5th and 6th centuries, the Jews were forbidden to hold public office. In 528 AD, the Byzantine Emperor Justinian passed the Justinian Code. It prohibited Jews from building synagogues, reading the Bible in Hebrew, assemble in public, celebrate the Passover before Easter, and testify against Christians in court. In 613 AD, very severe persecutions against the Jews began in Spain. Jews were given the options of converting to Christianity or leaving Spain. Jewish children over the age of 6 were taken from their parents and given to Christian families to educate and raise them as Christians. In 722, Leo III outlawed Judaism and many Jews were baptized against their will. In 855, Jews were exiled out of Italy. A great many church fathers and bishops openly condemned the Jews and called for the destruction of their synagogues. Saint Augustine, the greatest theologian of all time and one counted among the 3 great doctors of the Church, with Saint Ambrose and Saint Jerome, wrote in 415 AD, "The true image of the Hebrew is Judas Iscariot, who sold the Lord for silver." The Jew can never understand the Scriptures and forever will bear the guilt for the death of Jesus. Saint Jerome, who created the Latin Vulgate translation of the Bible, in 418 AD, wrote of the synagogue, "If you call it a brothel, a den of vice, the devil's refuge, Satan's fortress, a place to deprive the soul, an abyss of disaster, or whatever you will, you are still saying less than it deserves." John Chrysostom said, "The synagogue is worse than a brothel, it is the den of scoundrels and the repair of wild beasts, the temple of demons devoted to idolatrous cults, the refuge of brigands and debauches, and the cavern of devils. It is a criminal assembly of Jews, a place of meeting for the assassins of Christ, a house worse than a drinking shop, a den of thieves, a house of ill fame, a dwelling of iniquity, the refuge of devils, a gulf and an abyss of perdition." I would say the same things about their souls. As for me, I hate the synagogue, I hate the Jews for the same reason. Peter the Venerable wrote, "Yes, you Jews. I say, do I address you, you, who till this very day, deny the Son of God? How long, poor wretches, will ye not believe the truth? Truly I doubt whether a Jew can be really human. I lead out from its den a monstrous animal, and show it as a laughing stock in the amphitheatre of the world, in the sight of all the people. I bring thee forward, thou Jew, thou brute beast, in the sight of all men." Saint Hilary of Poitiers referred to Jews as a perverse people who God has cursed forever. Saint Ephraim referred to synagogues as brothels. In 380 AD, the Bishop of Milan was responsible for the burning of a synagogue. He referred to it as an act pleasing to God. In 538 AD, the Third and Fourth Councils of Orleans prohibited Jews from appearing in public during the Easter season. Canon 30 decreed that, from Thursday before Easter, for 4 days, Jews may not appear in the company of Christians. Marriages between Christians and Jews were prohibited. Christians were prohibited from converting to Judaism. Canon 24 of the Third Lateran Council stated, Jews should be slaves to Christians, and Canon 26 stated that, the testimony of Christians against Jews is to be preferred in all causes. Chrysostom, Origen, Jerome, and other church fathers believed that God punished the Jews with perpetual slavery for their alleged responsibility for the execution of Jesus. Perhaps, no one showed so much hatred to the Jews than the founder of the Reformation, Martin Luther. In his infamous little book, On the Jews and Their Lies, 1543 AD, Martin Luther made the following advices to all kings and rulers of Europe. What then shall we Christians do with this damned, rejected race of Jews? Since they live among us and we know about their lying and blasphemy and cursing, we cannot tolerate them if we do not wish to share in their lies, curses, and blasphemy. In this way we cannot quench the inextinguishable fire of divine rage nor convert the Jews. We must prayerfully and reverentially practice a merciful severity. Perhaps we may save a few from the fire and flames of hell. We must not seek vengeance. They are surely being punished 1,000 times more than we might wish them. Let me give you my honest advice. First, their synagogues should be set on fire, and whatever does not burn up should be covered or spread over with dirt so that no one may ever be able to see a cinder or stone of it. And this ought to be done for the honor of God and of Christianity in order that God may see that we are Christians, and that we have not wittingly tolerated or approved of such public lying, cursing, and blaspheming of His Son and His Christians. Secondly, their homes should likewise be broken down and destroyed. For they perpetrate the same things there that they do in their synagogues. For this reason they ought to be put under one roof or in a stable, like gypsies, in order that they may realize that they are not masters in our land, as they boast, but miserable captives, as they complain of incessantly before God with bitter wailing. Thirdly, they should be deprived of their prayer books and Talmuds in which such idolatry, lies, cursing, and blasphemy are taught. Fourth, their rabbis must be forbidden under threat of death to teach any more. Fifth, passport and traveling privileges should be absolutely forbidden to the Jews. For they have no business in the rural districts since they are not nobles, nor officials, nor merchants, nor the like. Let them stay at home. If you princes and nobles do not close the road legally to such exploiters, then some troop ought to ride against them, for they will learn from this pamphlet what the Jews are and how to handle them and that they ought not to be protected. You ought not, you cannot protect them, unless in the eyes of God you want to share all their abomination. To sum up, dear princes and nobles who have Jews in your domains, if this advice of mine does not suit you, then find a better one so that you and we may all be free of this insufferable devilish burden, the Jews. Let the government deal with them in this respect, as I have suggested. But whether the government acts or not, let everyone at least be guided by his own conscience and form for himself a definition or image of a Jew. When you lay eyes on or think of a Jew you must say to yourself, alas, that mouth which I there behold has cursed and execrated and maligned every Saturday my dear Lord Jesus Christ, who has redeemed me with His precious blood. In addition, it prayed and pleaded before God that I, my wife and children, and all Christians might be stabbed to death and perish miserably. And He Himself would gladly do this if He were able, in order to appropriate our goods. Such a desperate, thoroughly evil, poisonous, and devilish lot are these Jews, who for these 1400 years have been and still are our plague, our pestilence, and our misfortune. I have read and heard many stories about the Jews which agree with this judgment of Christ, namely, how they have poisoned wells, made assassinations, kidnapped children, as related before. I have heard that one Jew sent another Jew, and this by means of a Christian, a pot of blood, together with a barrel of wine, in which when drunk empty, a dead Jew was found. There are many other similar stories. For their kidnapping of children they have often been burned at the stake or banished, as we already heard. I am well aware that they deny all of this. It all coincides with the judgment of Christ which declares that they are venomous, bitter, vindictive, tricky serpents, assassins, and children of the devil, who sting and work harm stealthily wherever they cannot do it openly. For this reason, I would like to see them where there are no Christians. The Turks and other heathen do not tolerate what we Christians endure from these venomous serpents and young devils. Next to the devil, a Christian has no more bitter and galling foe than a Jew. There is no other to whom we accord as many benefactions and from whom we suffer as much as we do from these base children of the devil, this brood of vipers. On the Jews and Their Lies, Luther's Works, Volume 47, translated by Martin H. Bertram, Philadelphia, Fortress Press, 1971. Such unprecedented anti-Semitism by the leading Roman Catholic Church Fathers and the founder of the Protestant Reformation led to many persecutions and mass genocides of the Jews of Europe throughout the centuries, which reached its ugliest form during the Holocaust, at which Adolf Hitler and his collaborators murdered 6 million innocent Jewish men, women, and children. In the 7th century, the Jews of North Africa, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, and Morocco were killed if they refused to accept Islam. At one time, some 60,000 were sold as slaves. During the Middle Ages, the Jews were forced to wear the badges of shame, yellow, red, or blue. They were confined to ghettos. Germany considered the Jews to be the slaves of the emperor. They were excluded from the rising number of schools and universities. In the 11th century, England banished them from the country. When the First Crusade began in the 11th century, the cry among the Crusaders, "Kill the Jew and save your soul." Large numbers of Jews were challenged as Christ killers, embrace the cross, or die. 12,000 Jews in the Rhine Valley alone were killed in the First Crusade. This behavior toward the Jews continued for 8 additional crusades until the 9th Crusade in 1272. When they took Jerusalem in 1099, the Crusaders forced all the Jews into a large central synagogue and set it on fire. Those who tried to escape were forced back into the burning building. In 1146, the Second Crusade began. A French monk, Rudolph, called for the destruction of the Jews. In 1180, the French king, Philippus Augustus, arbitrarily seized all Jewish property and expelled all Jews out of France. In 1189, Jews were persecuted in England. The crown claimed all Jewish possessions. Most of their houses were burned. In the 12th century, general persecutions swept throughout Europe and hundreds of thousands of Jews were killed. In the 13th century, the Black Plague, bubonic plague or Black Death, swept Europe, and the Jews were accused of poisoning the wells of the Christians. Rumors spread that the Jews were not dying of the plague because the devil was protecting them and they were paying him back by poisoning the wells of the Christians. As a result, 1/2 of the Jews in Europe were murdered. In the 14th century, they were banished from France. As they fled France, the Portuguese refused them entry. In the 15th century, Spain forced 800,000 Jews into the sea, most of them drowning or falling to exposure. In 1411, the Spanish Inquisition began and tens of thousands of Jews were killed. A great many of them fled to Russia. Over 5 million Jews were relocated in Russia. By the 1881, Alexander III, the head of the Russian Church, stated a Jew public policy stating that 1/3 of the Jews had to die, 1/3 had to join the church, and the last 1/3 was to emigrate. Between 1880 and World War I, pogrom began. Pogrom is an organized sanctioned program of political persecution. It is an open season upon a particular people. Everyone has the right to persecute and kill them. Ukraine alone had 12,000 pogroms against the Jews. By the end of 1940s of the World War II, 6 out of every 10 Jews were killed. Kristallnacht, or the Night of the Broken Glass, was the night throughout Nazi Germany and Austria of 9 to 10 November, 1939, in which the shards of broken glass littered the streets when all Jewish-owned stores, buildings, houses, and synagogues had their windows smashed. 6 million Jews were killed by the German Nazi regime, under the command of Adolf Hitler and his collaborators in the Holocaust. Holocaust in Greek means holy burnt, or a sacrifice by fire to a god in which the whole animal is completely burnt. In Hebrew, the Holocaust came to be known as Shoah, which means calamity or catastrophe. From 70 AD to 1967, Palestine was ruled by 40 different nations. After the Jewish went in diaspora, the Christians occupied their land until the Muslims came and conquered them in the 7th century and took it from them. Then, in the 11th century, the Crusaders defeated the Muslims and occupied the land for 2 centuries until Muslims recaptured it and expelled them out. In 1948, the Promised Land went back to the chosen nation, the Jews. What happened to the Jews during those 2,000 years of wandering among other nations? They were treated as beggars and parasites and scorned and despised by everyone. They were enslaved and killed. In every continent and city their blood was spilled. They became a nation of ghosts. Their total destruction was sought by many, with their children taken from them and converted to Christianity. Many times, they were forced by Christians as well as Muslims to choose between religion or face death. The Church fabricated a false doctrine called replacement theology and claimed to have replaced Israel, with the Christians being the new Israelites. The Jews were considered a rejected and cursed people. They were called Christ killers, and everywhere they went they were tortured and killed. During the evil Nazi Holocaust, the Church turned a blind eye. When the Jews finally decided to return to their homeland, the Pope stood strongly against their return to Palestine. He argued that, if at all a Hebrew home is to be created, it should be created in any land except Palestine. The Pope's stand against the Jews was not different from the decision of the Sultan Abdul Hamid II of the Ottoman Empire, who agreed for the Jews to settle everywhere in his empire except Palestine. According to the replacement theology of the Roman Catholic Church, which inherited by many Protestant churches, that after the destruction of Jerusalem by the pagan Roman soldiers in 70 AD, in which 1,300,000 Jews were killed and 97,000 Jews were taken slaves, the Jews would be led away to be slaves among all the nations, and that they would remain in the dispersion diaspora until the end of the world. The Jews should not be permitted to return to Palestine with sovereignty. According to the sacred scriptures, the Jewish people must always live dispersed and vagrant, wandering, among the other nations, so that they may render witness to Christ not only by the scriptures, but by their very existence. Kurtzer David, 2001, Civiltà Cattolica, 1922, 4, pages 369 to 371, cited in Unholy War. London, Pan Books, page 273. In 1922, the Catholic periodical journal, Civiltà Cattolica, justifies Catholic anti-Semitism as natural response to the Jews' arrogance for refusing to believe in Christ. Anti-Semitism is nothing but the absolutely necessary and natural reaction to the Jews' arrogance. Catholic anti-Semitism, while never going beyond the moral law, adopts all necessary means to emancipate the Christian people from the abuse they suffer from their sworn enemy, the Jewish people, page 273. Some international figures believe that the Promised Land belongs to the Arabs and some believe it belongs to the Jews. In 1938, the father of the Indian nation, Mahatma Gandhi, wrote, "Palestine belongs to the Arabs in the same sense that England belongs to the English or France to the French. It is wrong and inhuman to impose the Jews on the Arabs. Surely it would be a crime against humanity to reduce the proud Arabs so that Palestine can be restored to the Jews partly or wholly as their national home." William R. Slomanson, Fundamental Perspectives on International Law, page 50. Martin Luther King, the leader of the 1960s African American civil rights movement, was a strong supporter of Israel. King paid frequent tribute to Jewish support for black rights, defended Israel's right to exist, supported the Jewish state, while calling for a negotiated settlement in keeping with his advocacy of nonviolence, and on more than one occasion opposed the anti-Zionism then taking increasing hold in the Black Power movement. King said, "Anti-Zionist is inherently anti-Semitic, and ever will be so." Sundquist, Eric J., 2005, Strangers in the Land, Blacks, Jews, Post-Holocaust America. Cambridge, Harvard University Press, page 110. In general, the Jews are the most hated people in the world. Jesus says to his disciples, "If the world hate you, ye know that it hated me before it hated you. If ye were of the world would love his own, but because ye are not of the world, but I have chosen you out of the world, therefore the world hateth you." John 15, 18-19. The long-lasting world's hatred of the Jews, anti-Semitism, proves the undeniable divine maxim that they are hated because they are the chosen people. Therefore, anti-Semitism is from the devil. A true Christian should always love the Jews and support their right to return to their homeland. The Jews are the most gifted people in the world. They are accomplished people in the arts, in business, in philosophy, in education, in finance, in science, etc. God gave them the land of Israel as an everlasting inheritance, made them into a great nation, and promising to bless those who bless them and to curse those cursing them. Genesis 12, 1-3. No other nation has been chosen by God except Israel. No other people have become the custodians of God's truth and oracles, the Holy Bible, except the Jews. No other nation has offered a book, the Bible, to mankind that is verifiable through science, through reason, through history, through morality, and through prophecy except the nation of the Jews. No other nation offered human race with a Bible, prophets, and Messiah who died for the sin of the world except the nation of Israel. The Bible said salvation is of the Jews, John 4, 22. Many nations are jealous of the nation of Israel and many more want to destroy it. To hate the Jews is equal to hate God. It is spiritual suicide to hate Israel. The Bible said all those who hate Zion, Israel, are going to face defeat, disgrace, destruction, and being removed from the blessing of God. Psalm 129, 5. A true Christian is a Gentile saved and converted over to Orthodox Judaism. A Jew converted to true Christianity is a completed Jew. A true Christian is the one who says to the Jew like Ruth said to Naomi, "Your people will be my people and your God my God." Ruth 1, 16. A convert to Christianity is a convert to Orthodox Judaism. Anti-Semitism within the Church is a theology of abomination. Also, replacement theology is the theology of abomination. Christianity is Jewish. The Jews have been kicked out of their land 3 times, returning time and again. They are the only people in the entire world who have remained without a country for 20 centuries. And all of a sudden, God gathered them from all over the world and brought them back to their promised land. God promised them a land of everlasting inheritance. Many mighty nations occupying that land have been uprooted by God and sent out. No nation has the right to claim that land except the Jews. The Arab Palestinians claim ownership, but neither their Quran nor the Sunnah of their Prophet has ever mentioned Palestine as belonging to the Arabs or to the Muslims. In fact, the Quran states very clearly that God has given the land to the children of Israel, Surah 29, 47. God did not give the Arab Muslims the land of Israel, but it was been acquired at the tip of a sword. It has been the same way with the Philistines, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Persians, the Byzantines, the Muslims, the Crusaders, the Egyptian Mamluks, the Fatimids, the Ottoman Turks, and the British. In 1967, the Jews were surrounded by 1 million Arab soldiers from Egypt, Syria, Iraq, and Jordan. They were outnumbered by 12-1. The Arabs were supported by 30 nations. They had been trained and assisted by the top military officials of Russia and joined by 30 South Korean pilots. On the second day, they were joined by the Pakistani Air Force and aircraft from Libya, Algeria, Morocco, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia. Israel was left alone to face the combined might of Jew hostility. The whole world kept watch, expecting to see the destruction of the tiny state of Israel and the annihilation of the Jews. In 6 days, Israel defeated the combined Arab and Muslim armies and destroyed their planes before they took off. The 6-Day War, 1967. How could such a small group of hated people achieve such a victory if God did not stand with them? The Psalm 129 answers that question. No matter how, nations who hate Israel cannot prevail. The United Nations issued over 370 resolutions condemning Israel for defending itself against the never-ending rocket attacks of the Palestinians, but were ominously silent against Palestinian aggression. Iran vowed to wipe Israel from the world map, and UN issued no condemnation to such threat. It is true that God scattered His chosen nation, the Jews, all over the world because of their sins. In the 1st century, the Jews committed a huge sin by rejecting their Messiah and King, the Lord Jesus Christ, and delivered Him to the Romans to crucify and kill Him. For that reason, God rejected them and hardened their hearts. Nevertheless, the Bible tells us, their rejection was temporary and not final, and their hardness is partial, Romans 11:25. Their temporary rejection and partial hardness opened the door for the Gentiles to come in and be grafted in the rich root of Israel, Romans 11:25-26. Their rejection will continue until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. When the elect among the Gentiles come in, God will remove the hardness of the Jews, and then all Israel will be saved. The Apostle Paul said to his Christian brethren at Rome, "For I do not want you, brethren, to be uninformed of this mystery, so that you will not be wise in your own estimation, that a partial hardening has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in, and so all Israel will be saved, just as it is written, the deliverer will come from Zion, he will remove ungodliness from Jacob," Romans 11:25-26. Many Christians ask who the chosen people of God are after God has partially rejected the Jews and put them to sleep. Are there two chosen peoples of God, one Israel and one the Church? The answer to this question, simply put, there is only one chosen people of God, the elect. When a Christian became a true believer, he converted to the Orthodox Judaism, and when a Jew accepted Christ, he became a completed Jew. Those who maintain a distinction between Israel and the Church, replacing the latter with the former, have often fallen in anti-Semitism and unjustly persecuted the Jews. Meanwhile, God allowed other nations to persecute His chosen nation, the Jews. But, it pains God to see His chosen nation being persecuted. He also punishes those nations who transgress against His chosen people. Through the Black Plague, 1/4 of Europe perished. During the 30-year War of Religions between the Catholics and Protestants, 1/5 of Europe perished. Germany's population was reduced from 30 million to 13 million. In the World War I, 25 million Europeans were killed, and in the World War II another 55 million people died. Joseph Stalin killed 20 million Russians. Europe was plagued by all kinds of atheistic isms, and today the majority of the Europeans don't believe in God. As soon as the Roman Emperor Constantine converted to Christianity and began to persecute the Jews, the Church joined Rome in persecuting the chosen people too. Shortly after that, the Roman Empire was destroyed by the barbarian tribes in 476 AD. Europe descended into the Dark Ages, which plagued it for over 1,000 years. The Church replaced the Roman Empire and through Charlemagne created its own Holy Roman Empire. The Pope of Rome became the ruler of the world. The devil corrupted the Roman Catholic Church and rendered it beyond reformation. The light of the Reformation shone for a while until its main founder, Martin Luther, began to call for the persecution and destruction of the Jews. By the way, the Reformers did not succeed in reforming the Roman Catholic Church. They just split and formed their different churches, which became known as the Protestant churches. In his dirty little book, On the Jews and Their Lies, Martin Luther writes, "My advice, as I said earlier, first, that their synagogues be burned down, and that all who are able toss sulfur and pitch. It would be good if someone could also throw in some hellfire. Second, that all their books, their prayer books, their Talmudic writings, also the entire Bible, be taken from them, not leaving them one leaf, and that these be preserved for those who may be converted. Third, that they be forbidden on pain of death to praise God, to give thanks, to pray, and to teach publicly among us and in our country. Fourth, that they be forbidden to utter the name of God within our hearing. For we cannot with a good conscience listen to this or tolerate it. He who hears this name God from a Jew must inform the authorities, or else throw sow dung at him when he sees him and chase him away. But what will happen even if we do burn down the Jews' synagogues and forbid them publicly to praise God, to pray, to teach, to utter God's name? They will still keep doing it in secret. If we know that they are doing this in secret, it is the same as if they were doing it publicly. For our knowledge of their secret doings and our toleration of them implies that they are not secret after all, and thus our conscience is encumbered with it before God. If this does not help, we must drive them out like mad dogs. In article entitled, Martin Luther's Dirty Little Book, Jim Walker states, on the Jews and their lies, Luther took Jewish hatred to a new level when he proposed setting fire to their synagogues and schools, taking them away their homes, forbidding prayer and teaching or the utterance of God's name. Luther wanted to be rid of them and requested that the government and ministers deal with the problem. He requested pastors and preachers to follow his example of issuing warnings against the Jews. He goes so far as to claim that, we are at fault in not slaying them for avenging the death of Jesus Christ. Hitler's Nazi government in the 1930s and 1940s fit Luther's desires to a T.